If you're in your 60s, 70s, or even 80s and have stopped being sexually active, there's something important I want to share with you, something that might genuinely surprise you. This isn't simply about pleasure. It's about your heart, your brain, and your deeper connection to life itself. And if no one else has mentioned this before, let me be the first to say it. Letting go of intimacy might be quietly draining your health, your energy, and even your sense of meaning. I'm Dr. James. I've spent more than 3 decades guiding both men and women toward better well-being after the age of 60. And I've seen what happens when people stop viewing sex as a luxury and start recognizing it as an essential element of healthy aging. You might believe it's too late for me, or think that chapter of my life is closed. But the reality is there are 4 specific impacts, real physical and emotional, that begin when intimacy fades. Most people don't hear about these until it's already affecting them. But here's the encouraging part. It's never too late to awaken that side of yourself again. In this video, I'll explain exactly how. And in just a few moments, we'll begin with the most unexpected risk of all. For now, let's look at the first and possibly most underestimated effect of losing intimacy after 60, how it silently begins to influence your brain, your memory, and how you experience life. First, your brain starts aging faster than it should. I clearly remember a patient from years back, George, age 72, a retired math teacher. He came to my clinic concerned about his memory. He was forgetting names, having trouble concentrating, and told me, "Doc, I just don't feel mentally sharp anymore." At first, nothing seemed medically wrong. No signs of dementia, no hidden illness. But after a few open conversations, George shared something that struck me. Since losing his wife, he hadn't had any form of sexual activity, not once in nearly 5 years. It might seem like an unimportant detail, and many would overlook it. But here's what the research shows, and what I've seen repeatedly in my career: when sexual connection vanishes, the brain starts to lose one of its richest sources of stimulation. You see, intimacy boosts blood circulation to the brain, especially in areas linked to memory, emotion, and learning. It also triggers the release of dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins, natural brain chemicals that lift your mood, stress, and help guard against mental aging. Without that stimulation and hormonal activity, the brain can begin to slow down. Concentration weakens, energy dips, and most significantly, the risk of memory loss and early signs of dementia grows. I'm not saying sex is a cure-all, but when it's missing for long periods, your brain loses out on a deeply human experience that supports your vitality. It's not about youth or performance, it's about staying connected. Intimacy in any form, whether it's physical touch, emotional closeness, or sexual expression, helps keep the brain stimulated and the emotional networks engaged. Without it, individuals often begin to pull away. They become less social, less inquisitive, and at times even less inclined to care for themselves. That gradual fading isn't just emotional, it's neurological. That's exactly why I approach this topic with such seriousness. Once that decline begins reversing, it becomes extremely difficult. But with the right steps, it's entirely possible to keep your mind sharp, active, and emotionally vibrant well into your 80s and beyond. While the brain often shows the first signs of disconnection from intimacy, the body doesn't stay quiet for long either. In fact, a shift begins to take place in your physical health, something far more visible and potentially more harmful than people realize. Let's discuss what happens to your circulation, your physical strength, and your hormonal balance when intimacy disappears from your daily life. 2. Your body begins to lose critical circulation and hormonal equilibrium. I remember having a session with a couple, Linda and Carl, both in their late 60s. They had been married for nearly 4 decades, but over the last 5 years, their physical connection had gradually diminished. "We just figured that part of our life was behind us," Linda said softly, almost apologetically. Carl agreed, but admitted he no longer felt like himself. His energy had dropped. He had lost muscle, gained weight, and confessed that he felt much older than he actually was. When we looked closer, one key issue stood out: their physical intimacy had completely vanished. I encounter this pattern far more often than I wish I did. When sexual activity disappears, particularly after age 60, the body begins to lose its natural rhythm. The cardiovascular stimulation that comes with arousal and physical affection diminishes. Circulation slows down. Blood vessels become less responsive, and the flow of oxygen to vital organs, including the brain and heart, declines. Sexual intimacy isn't only about pleasure. It's also a form of exercise, one that improves blood flow, enhances lung function, and strengthens cardiovascular health. When that stops, your body takes notice. Even more concerning is what begins to happen hormonally. In both men and women, sexual engagement is crucial for maintaining hormonal health. For men, testosterone can drop significantly without regular stimulation, leading to exhaustion, mood changes, weight gain, and even depression. In women, levels of estrogen and oxytocin fall, increasing the likelihood of joint discomfort, mood instability, and even bone density loss. These are not minor annoyances. They can compromise your mobility, your independence, and your overall long-term wellness. What troubles me most is how silently these changes unfold. You don't wake up one day feeling drastically different. It builds slowly. You move a little slower, you stop going to the gym, your sleep worsens, you gain weight and start to believe it's all just part of growing old. But the reality is that much of this may be directly tied to a lack of physical connection and intimacy. And here's something most people don't realize: you don't need to have intercourse to receive these benefits. Gentle touch, emotional closeness, even simple acts of affection can reignite those hormonal responses. It's not about performance, it's about presence. And the longer you go without it, the more difficult it becomes to restore your body's natural balance. As serious as those physical shifts can be, they still don't reach the most profound loss of all. Because when intimacy fades, it's not just your body that suffers, it's your identity, your sense of connection, and your feeling of worth. For many older adults, this quiet pain runs deeper than they ever express. Let's explore what happens to both your relationship and your sense of self when sexual closeness gradually disappears. 3. Your relationship and self-esteem may suffer in silence. There's a kind of quiet I often notice in couples who've been together for many years. It's not loud, not full of conflict, but it's heavy. A silence that sits between them. I remember speaking with a woman named Margaret, 74 years old, whose husband had overcome cancer. The treatments had left their mark, and along the way, they had stopped being intimate. She looked at me and said, "I don't want him to feel pressured, but I also miss being touched." Tears filled her eyes as she softly added, "I miss feeling like a partner, not just a caregiver." That quiet distance, emotional, physical, unspoken, can slowly unravel even the strongest bonds. When intimacy disappears, even for valid reasons, people often stop reaching out, stop initiating, and start doubting their own desirability. What remains is a strange kind of loneliness, not simply being alone, but feeling invisible beside someone who once knew you better than anyone. Over time, that loneliness can harden into resentment, shame, or deep insecurity. One partner may assume the other has lost interest. The other may feel guilt, fear, or frustration. But most don't talk about it. They simply adjust. And slowly, what once felt alive becomes routine. Two well-meaning people living under one roof but no longer truly connected. And if you're single, the truth applies just as strongly. When we stop believing we're deserving of emotional or physical closeness, we begin to shrink not just in our longing, but in who we believe we are. We lose part of our identity, that longing to be seen, held, and valued as a whole person. That erosion of self-worth won't show up in medical tests, but it can quietly steal years from your life and joy from your heart. What worries me most is how hidden this damage can be. You can be surrounded by loved ones and still feel emotionally empty. You can be in a faithful marriage and still feel unwanted. And in time, that kind of emptiness can lead to depression, anxiety, withdrawal, and even serious health consequences, because the human heart wasn't made to survive without connection. But here's the most hopeful truth I can offer: it doesn't have to remain this way. Even small acts of tenderness, honesty, and vulnerability can begin to repair the distance. I've seen couples in their 70s rediscover laughter, affection, and even fall in love again, not because they had perfect bodies, but because they found the courage to reach for one another again. Still, for all the emotional weight this topic carries, the next consequence may be the most profound of all. Because when intimacy fades, it's not just your brain, body, or heart that's affected. It could actually reduce the number of years you have left. Let me explain what science has uncovered. 4. You may unknowingly be shortening your life. I once worked with a gentleman named Robert. He was 81, confident, independent, and still mentally sharp. But what stood out to me wasn't his heart rate or cholesterol levels. It was the vibrancy he radiated compared to his peers. When I asked what he thought kept him going strong, he smiled and said, "I still flirt with my wife every morning. We cuddle every night, and occasionally," he laughed, "we still make love." For him, it wasn't about the act itself. It was about the emotional bond, the connection, and the joy that reminded him he was fully alive. What Robert instinctively understood, perhaps without realizing, is something that scientific research has confirmed time and again. Regular physical intimacy in any form is strongly linked to a longer, healthier life. I'm not referring to intense activity or youthful passion. I'm talking about real, steady closeness, simple touch affection, and intimacy. These moments release powerful hormones like oxytocin and endorphins, which help reduce inflammation, lower blood pressure, and strengthen cardiovascular health. In fact, one study published in the British Medical Journal found that older individuals who maintained an active, intimate life had significantly lower mortality rates. That's not just opinion, it's proven data. Physical affection isn't merely soothing, it's life-enhancing. It improves sleep quality, boosts immune function, lowers stress hormones like cortisol, and resets the nervous system in essential ways as we age. However, when intimacy disappears, the body begins to respond differently. Stress hormones remain elevated. Sleep becomes disrupted. Immune resilience weakens. You may start to feel more anxious, more withdrawn, and less inclined to socialize or stay active. These aren't just feelings, they are measurable changes that can shorten your lifespan. Sadly, too many people assume this downward shift is just a natural part of aging. But in reality, it's often triggered by emotional disconnection. The human body was designed to flourish through closeness. When that is missing, whether due to choice, routine, or circumstance, you unknowingly raise your risk of illness, depression, and even early death. It may sound stark, but it's something I've witnessed far too often. Yet I've also seen something else, something just as powerful. I've seen individuals in their 70s and 80s redisc. That inner spark is still within you, even if it's been buried beneath years of distance, grief, or self-doubt. Which brings me to the most vital message of all, the one many people never get the chance to hear. No matter how long it's been or how unreachable intimacy might feel today, you can find your way back to it. Let me show you how to begin, because it's truly never too late to start again. 5. It's never too late to start again. I will always remember a woman named Eleanor. She came to see me at age 78. She was articulate, graceful, and composed, but her voice trembled as she confessed, "I miss feeling like a woman. Not someone's grandmother, not someone's patient, just a woman." It had been almost 10 years since she had experienced any kind of physical closeness, and she admitted she had come to believe that chapter of her life was closed. But what she didn't realize, and what I witness every day, is that the human spirit has a remarkable ability to awaken, no matter how much time has passed. Whether you're 60 or 90, whether it's been a few months or many years, the truth is this: as long as you're breathing, intimacy is still within reach. While desire may evolve with age and the body may not react the way it once did, true, meaningful, life-giving connection never expires. Rekindling intimacy doesn't need to start with grand romantic gestures or physical acts. Often it begins with something small: a conversation, a gentle touch, a shared moment of laughter. Even the simplest steps, Eye contact, vulnerability, or quietly saying "I miss you" can unlock doors you thought were closed forever. For couples who've grown distant, that first step back can feel uncomfortable, even frightening. But every time I've watched someone take that leap, they emerge on the other side lighter, more joyful, and more connected than they've been in years. And if you're single, widowed, or currently on your own, please don't assume this message doesn't apply to you. Reconnection can begin within yourself. Your body is still deserving of love and care. Your heart still has room for affection, joy, and companionship. Whether it's through therapeutic touch, meaningful friendships, or simply being open to future love, your path forward remains wide open. The question isn't, "Can I have it back?" The question is, "Am I ready to try?" I've worked with so many people who were convinced their time had passed. Some were dealing with health challenges, others carried years of shame, fear, or emotional distance. But when they gave themselves permission to try without pressure or expectation, something inside them came alive. Their energy shifted. Their health improved. Most of all, they began to feel like themselves again. You are not too old. You are not beyond hope. Your story is far from over, and the next chapter might be the most fulfilling yet. So now the real question is, if one small step could bring you back to a life of joy, connection, and renewed energy, what would stop you from taking it? Let's close with a truth I hope you'll carry with you for the rest of your days. 6. Conclusion. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you not just for listening, but for being open. This isn't always an easy conversation. Discussing intimacy, emotional closeness, or growing older can bring up discomfort, sadness, or even regret. But if there's one lesson I've learned in all my years working with older adults, it's this: the longing to feel alive, to feel loved, to feel seen, it never truly goes away. It only gets buried under time, grief, and silence. We've explored how your brain can begin to decline when intimacy fades, how your hormones and circulation weaken, how relationships quietly suffer, and believe it or not, how even your lifespan can be affected. These aren't minor side effects. They're real, tangible, and life-shaping changes. And yet there's one consistent truth that runs through every single one of these risks: they're not the end of the story. I've witnessed people reconnect after being emotionally distant for decades. I've seen widows and widowers find love again well into their 70s. I've helped men rediscover confidence they believed was gone forever. I've seen women come to understand that they are still radiant, still worthy of affection, still deserving of love. And you know what all of these people had in common? They allowed themselves to start over. This isn't about reversing time. It's about reclaiming what still rightfully belongs to you: intimacy, happiness, and meaningful connection. These gifts aren't just for the young. In fact, I would argue they matter even more as we grow older, because they nourish not only the body but also the soul. So wherever you find yourself on this path, whether you're in a happy marriage, a struggling relationship, living alone, or somewhere in between, I hope this message reminded you that your story is still unfolding. There is still space for laughter, for healing, for closeness. And if there's a voice inside quietly saying, "Maybe it's possible," I encourage you to listen to it. You don't need to solve everything in one day. You don't need a perfect plan. All you need is to take one small step. Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe it's reaching out. Maybe it's simply letting yourself believe again, because you are not finished. Not by a long shot. And if no one said this to you recently, hear it from me. You deserve to feel vibrant, wanted, and connected. Not someday. Not just in memories. But right now. Let this moment be the beginning of something new. The most meaningful chapter of your life may still be ahead of you, waiting to be lived.